they never chose. Images passed down by family stories, by movies, by things people say casually but mean deeply. We grow up absorbing these pictures of success, love, stability, and happiness. They settle inside us without asking permission. For me, the symbol of a future wife was never about romance alone. It was about order. It was about the belief that one day, everything messy would be arranged into something understandable. That belief had kept me moving during times when I felt scattered. But now I saw that order does not always come from outside. Sometimes it comes from learning how to stay with the mess without running away from it. There were days when this new understanding made me feel lonely in a different way. Not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of seeing clearly. When you stop leaning on imagined futures, you feel the full weight of the present. You feel uncertainty more sharply. You notice the gaps in your life where answers should be but are not. I had moments when I wished I could go back to not knowing, back to believing without questioning. But even as I wished for that comfort, I knew I could not return. Once something is seen, it cannot be unseen. The realization had changed the way my mind worked. It had altered the lens through which I viewed my own thoughts. I began to understand that growth is often quiet and uncomfortable. It does not announce itself with confidence. It arrives with doubt, hesitation, and a sense of standing on unstable ground. I learned that it is possible to move forward without knowing exactly where you are going. That idea used to scare me. Now it felt strangely natural. Life itself is uncertain. Expecting clarity at every step was something I had learned, not something that was true. Accepting that helped me breathe easier, even on days when nothing felt resolved. Sometimes I thought about the younger version of myself, the one who first formed that emotional picture of the future. I felt tenderness toward that version. He needed something to believe in. He needed a reason to endure confusion and disappointment. That imagined future gave him strength. I did not want to judge him for that. I wanted to thank him. Without that symbol, I might not have survived certain moments. Realizing this helped me be kinder to myself. It showed me that even illusions can serve a purpose, as long as we know when to let them change. As weeks passed, I noticed a subtle shift in how I related to people around me. I listened more. I spoke less with certainty and more with curiosity. I stopped assuming that everyone else had their lives figured out. I saw how many people were also carrying invisible images, private dreams, quiet fears. This awareness made me feel connected in a way I had not felt before. Not because we shared the same goals, but because we shared the same uncertainty. There was comfort in that shared human condition. It reminded me that confusion is not failure. It is part of being alive. The idea of the future stopped feeling like a fixed point and started feeling like a conversation. Some days, the conversation was hopeful. Other days, it was quiet or confusing. I learned to let it change tone without forcing it back into something familiar. That flexibility was new to me. I was used to controlling my expectations tightly, afraid that if I loosened my grip, everything would fall apart. Instead, I found that letting go created room for unexpected understanding. Not answers, but understanding. There were nights when I lay awake, thinking about how easily we mistake imagination for destiny, how we build our identities around what we think will happen, rather than who we are becoming. That thought stayed with me. It made me question how much of my life was shaped by anticipation instead of attention. Anticipation pulls us forward, sometimes too fast. Attention keeps us grounded. Learning to balance the two felt like learning a new language. I was not fluent yet, but I was practicing. I noticed that the more I accepted uncertainty, the less afraid I felt of change. Before, any shift in my plans felt like a threat to the future I imagined. Now, change felt like information. It told me something about myself, about my needs, about what no longer fit. That perspective did not remove disappointment, but it softened it. It allowed disappointment to exist without turning into despair. I could feel sad without feeling lost. That distinction mattered more than I realized. The emotional photo that once guided me had not disappeared. It had transformed. It no longer showed a perfect outcome. It showed a state of being, calm presence, a sense of inner alignment. That was harder to chase and easier to lose, but it felt more real. It required me to pay attention to my inner life, not just my external progress. It asked me to be honest about what drained me and what gave me energy. Those questions were not simple, but they were necessary. Some mornings I woke up feeling directionless. Without a clear image pulling me forward, I felt exposed. But over time, I realized that direction does not always come from a distant goal. Sometimes it comes from small decisions made with awareness. Choosing to rest when I was tired. Choosing to speak when something mattered to me. Choosing to stop when I was moving out of habit rather than intention. These choices did not create a dramatic story, but they created a life that felt more mine. I also learned that it is okay to want a future without needing to define it completely. Wanting connection does not require imagining its final form. Wanting meaning does not require knowing exactly where it will come from. That understanding eased the pressure I had placed on myself. It allowed desire to exist without turning into demand. I could hope without forcing hope to behave a certain way. There were moments when fear returned strongly. Fear of wasting time. Fear of choosing wrong. Fear of ending up with regrets. These fears did not vanish just because I understood them. But now, when they appeared, I met them differently. I did not argue with them or try to silence them. I listened. I asked what they were protecting. Often, they were trying to protect the same thing they always had: my sense of worth, my longing to matter, my need to feel safe. Seeing that made the fear feel less like an enemy and more like a signal. The realization also changed how I viewed success. Before, success was tied to arrival, to reaching a point where uncertainty ended. Now success felt more like honesty, being truthful with myself about what I could handle, what I needed, and what I was willing to let go of. That kind of success did not look impressive from the outside, but it felt steady on the inside. It was quieter, less dramatic, but more sustainable. As time moved forward, I stopped waiting for a moment when everything would make sense. I accepted that understanding comes in pieces, that clarity visits briefly and then leaves again. That confusion is not a sign that something is wrong, but a sign that something is changing. That acceptance did not give me peace every day, but it gave me patience. And patience changed how I treated myself during difficult moments. I realized that the future I once imagined had served as a mirror. It showed me what I valued, even if it was not a map of what would happen. It reflected my desire for stability, connection, and meaning. Understanding that helped me focus on cultivating those qualities now, rather than postponing them. I could create moments of stability by being consistent with myself. I could experience connection by being present with others. I could find meaning by paying attention to what felt real instead of what looked ideal. As the days kept moving, I began to notice something else that surprised me. Without the old image controlling my thoughts, I felt emotions more clearly. Before, I filtered everything through the future. If something hurt, I told myself it would make sense later. If something felt good, I treated it as practice for something bigger. Now, emotions arrived without explanation, and I had no future excuse to soften them. At first that felt overwhelming. Sadness felt heavier, joy felt shorter, silence felt louder. But slowly, I understood that this rawness was not a problem. It was honesty. Life was no longer being postponed inside my mind. It was happening in real time, asking me to feel it fully, even when that feeling was uncomfortable. I realized how much energy I had spent managing myself for a future audience that did not exist. I behaved as if one day I would look back and judge every choice I made. That imaginary judgment shaped my behavior. It made me cautious. It made me restrained. It made me delay parts of myself that wanted expression. Letting go of that imagined future allowed me to act with less performance and more presence. I did not suddenly become fearless or confident. I simply became less divided. My actions and my feelings started to align more often, and that alignment felt grounding. There were moments when I felt grief for the life I thought I was building. Not because it was gone, but because it was no longer guaranteed. That grief was strange. It was not tied to a real loss, but to the loss of certainty. I mourned the simplicity of believing that everything would work out in a specific way. I mourned the comfort of having a clear picture to lean on. But grief has a way of opening space too. In that space, new questions appeared. Questions that were not about outcomes but about values. What kind of days did I want to live? What kind of effort felt honest to me? What kind of pace could I sustain without burning myself down? I noticed that when I stopped chasing a defined future, my relationship with time changed. Time stopped feeling like something I was racing against. It became something I was moving with. I paid attention to how long things actually took, emotionally and mentally. Healing took longer than I expected. Understanding arrived slowly. Motivation came and went. Instead of fighting these rhythms, I began to respect them. That respect reduced a quiet tension I had carried for years. I was no longer demanding that my life move faster than it could. I also became aware of how often people around me spoke about the future with certainty they did not feel. We all do it. We talk about plans and goals as if saying them out loud will make them real. I started listening beneath the words. I heard fear, hope, pressure, and longing hiding inside simple statements. This awareness did not make me cynical. It made me compassionate. I saw myself in others more clearly. We were all trying to give shape to uncertainty, using language as a temporary anchor. There were times when I felt tempted to build a new image to replace the old one. A different version of the future, more flexible, more realistic. But I caught myself. I understood that the habit itself was the issue, not the image. The habit of leaning too hard on what comes next instead of standing firmly in what is. That realization did not mean I stopped thinking about tomorrow. It meant I stopped using tomorrow to escape today. That distinction mattered deeply. As I lived this way, I discovered how much meaning exists in small, unnoticed moments. A quiet morning before the world wakes up. A brief sense of relief after finishing something difficult. A thought that passes through my mind and leaves a trace without demanding action. These moments did not build toward a grand story, but they built a sense of being alive. Before, I might have ignored them as insignificant.